Hi, everybody. Welcome. We'll get started here. And it looks like, hi, Lynn, are you unmuted? Can you check your audio?
I should be okay. You got me?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, and if I'm going to record on my end, I don't see a record button, so I guess you've got it.
I'm recording, so hopefully it's all working out great. As people are coming into the chats, I think I selected the setting where you all are muted, but just in case, make sure that you're all muted, please. We had some trouble last time with feedback. But anyway, welcome to our monthly chat where Lynn and I get together and discuss a topic, usually one that's been suggested. And I had a great suggestion come onto my podcast, and that was on how can we approach our relationship with horses that we've had for a long time, maybe, and you don't have any overt problems necessarily, which is great. And maybe some of the material you read in magazines and here on podcasts don't apply to your horse because you've kind of worked out the kinks for the most part. And I think this is a wonderful situation to find yourself in. And my mind goes first to just enjoy the fact that this is your status. But we always want to check in and say, well, are we all thriving? Are our horses thriving? And Lynn, I thought you would be an interesting one to discuss this with because you've had your horses a long time and they're not young anymore. So this seems like a pretty relevant topic for you. So how do you approach your day in and day out?
I look for the spark of interest from the horse. You know, if they're excited, then I'm excited. So I'm looking more for the atmosphere than for what we actually accomplish, which I found very intriguing because the less I worry about what tangible goal we accomplish, the more we accomplish. Because I'm thinking about, is my horse having fun? Is he engaged? Is he interested? Is he challenged? I'm not looking for necessarily physical challenge, that depends on the horse, but mentally challenged. Am I giving him a problem that is his or a suggestion that catches his interest? So it's kind of an atmosphere thing.
And you're lucky because your horses live at home. And I love seeing your Facebook posts where you can interject these little moments of novelty and keeping the horse engaged and stimulated throughout your day, I'm guessing. But especially it seems like when you do your chore routines, you'll have little posts on how maybe you gave them a little game or a little task to do as they came from the field to the stall, for example. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about how you think about that novelty. We've covered it a little bit before, but it's always good to recap. Why is novelty even important? Why does that matter with a horse that, like I say, they don't have any problems per se? So why should we prioritize this novelty?
Well, I think you and Amy mentioned that in a previous chat where you talked about how neurologically the brain chemicals are positive brain chemicals are stimulated when there's novelty. And that makes sense because if you think about wild horses, they didn't stand around waiting for somebody to provide hay with room service here. They had every day, they had a problem they had to solve. They had to go find their food and water and shelter and look out for each other. So they had responsibilities all day and they had things they had to think about. So standing around with nothing to do all day can't be good for our horses. So I think they like having jobs, even if the job is just knowing that when a human shows up, they have to put on their good manners and be tuned into us and ready to listen to what we're telling them. But at the same time, I want to be listening to my horse. So I want to encourage them to tell me what they like to do. So sometimes, for instance, if I take Brandy in the ring to play with her, and I think we're going to play with some agility thing, and instead so I might be thinking, oh, we're gonna do trot pulls, or we're going to do this exercise that Jack gave us, and I've got her off lead, and Brandy just wanders off, and she goes and stands on a mat. It's like, okay, she wants to play a different game today. So I play her game, And her game with the mat usually is, I'll have her stand one place and I'll tell her wait there. And then when I cue her to move, she moves and she goes and stands on the mat. And then she gets the praise and so on. And after we've played her game for a little while, then she's interested in playing my game. Like, okay, you played my game. Now, what was that exercise that you wanted me to do? So I've captured her interest by giving her something that she wanted to have and wanted to do. So I'm always looking for that spark of interest or a challenge, but each horse has different levels of what they need. My husband's mare Shiloh doesn't like to get pushed too far out of her comfort zone. One new little thing is good enough to suit her. She's like, yeah, okay, that was new. Now let me go back to my comfort zone and do something I know how to do. Bronze, my Arab, is just the opposite. The bigger the challenge, the better he liked it. Hey, give me something I've never done before, and let me figure out how I think I should do it. And if you don't like how I did it, that's okay. And this is, I think, another thing that engages horses is when we give them an opportunity to show us what they're interested in doing, then we can't tell them, well, you did that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, instead, I like to encourage them to experiment, because then they're using their own mind. What I'm looking for is initiative, not just obedience. You know, because if we're talking about, go ahead.
I think you've tapped into a couple interesting things here, and one I wanted to highlight is you're talking about the horse a lot, but really this has a lot to do with the handler and the rider checking in with themselves on what is this daily routine / rut that we come up with for our own horses, especially if you don't have the luxury of having the horse in your backyard. And many of our viewers might, but if you have your horse at a boarding facility, I find just by observing that a lot of my students, when they show up, they have this like daily routine, and I'm not sure they're always aware of it, but I think that's worth checking in with. Like, have I been showing up and going through the same sequence for the last 5 years? Because that does breed this sort of boredom and listlessness and shuffling through the motions, not only from ourselves, but from our horses. You know, do you always go get the horse the same way, lead him up to the tie rack and do things in the same sequence? And it doesn't have to be a wild shakeup of that routine if you're short on time, but little opportunities to introduce novelty. And as you're pointing out, Lynn, sometimes just listening to the horse gives you a good starting point. You know, are they looking at something over there that you might be able to go check out before you go do your normal saddling routine? These kinds of things. So you're giving us a good reminder to be mindful and just checking with ourselves on, like, do I always do things in the same order when I show up at the barn for the same amount of time? Like, is there a lot of sameness?
Yeah, and you've reminded me, not everybody has the luxury of having their horse at home where we have more time. So if you have a schedule, you know, you're trying to fit your riding time in amongst other obligations, you don't have to give up the goals that you have. You know, you may have very specific behavior or performance goals that you want to reach and maintain, but even taking a few minutes out of that, like take a little break from that. And your example of the horse wanting to check something out, I think, is a really important one, because curiosity is a very important positive emotion. So even if it's something as simple as, oh, let me sniff this tack box that's sitting here in the aisle as we walk by. So you take 30 seconds to do that. You've just broken up a little bit of the routine and given the horse a positive lift, and he's probably more likely then to engage and be more ready to do whatever your agenda is.
Yeah. And also, just keying into their state every day with a horse that you've had for so many years. I know you've had your horses for a lot of years. I have as well at this point. And you and I have talked in the past about the value in terms of stimulating the horse's curiosity. We've talked about the value of taking them for a lead line walk. And I revisited that myself last week. You know, I noticed my horse Corazon he's a good boy. He's very well behaved, quote unquote. But, you know, when I would go and put the halter on, you know, we're at the end of a long season, and he's like, oh, hey, you know, there's just no energy. And so I started 3 days last week. I just took him for a lead line walk, about a mile and a half down the road. And he perked right up and had a lot more pep in his step. and, got to check out the sheep and the neighbor's dog that came barking and, all the good stuff. And then I did my normal ride. And again, I have the luxury of the time to fit that in, but it was a good check-in for me to be like, hey, let's take a pause here. Let's read the situation. Like, I don't see enough engagement from my horse. What can I add? And it was as simple as a lead line walk, and a bonus, I get exercise too, right? It's win-win. So
yes. And I think horses like to see a purpose in what they're doing, even if the purpose is to earn something that they feel like doing. But you may have a horse who does very nice side pass and turns on the forehand and haunches, and but they're wondering, what's the point of this? Okay, I'm doing this to humor you, and maybe it's even a little bit of fun, but what's the point? So go open and shut gates. I never open the gate on foot. I always get on my horse first, ride him to the arena, and then we open and shut the gate from on his back. And so he sees there's a purpose to these things, or set up some obstacles in the ring. If you're practicing serpentines, go around cones, give them a sense of there's a reason for doing this.
Mhm.
If you go out on the trail, I like to clear a trail from horseback. And it's amazing how much maneuvering you need to do. Okay, I need to get this branch that's over here. So I need my horse to step over this way while I'm holding the branch and my nippers. And so I've got to use only my seat and legs. And then he has to stand still.
Yeah.
So that I can do this. But he also sees, first of all, I apparently have some purpose, however strange it may seem to him. And then he gets the bonus if he gets to nibble whatever leaves are in reach while I'm doing this. But it turns something into a game that actually is also good for our communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned something earlier. I wanted to go back to, you referenced wild horses and the fact that they don't just sort of stand around performing the same set of sequences on a daily basis. And I wanted, from a physical standpoint, I also wanted to remind people that I always encourage, I'm huge on equine fitness. I mean, that's my thing, right? And I always remind people that if and when you have the time, and some days you do have the time maybe on weekends, you've got extra time at the boarding facility, dosing exercise out throughout a day is always more valuable than just an isolated 45-minute or 1-hour session. And they've done a lot of compelling studies on people to prove this. We haven't yet done these studies on horses. Large-scale horse studies are hard to perform, but I see the results in my own horse. So when you have the luxury of doing a 10-15-minute session, and then maybe put the horse up or let him stand tied next to his buddies, and then come back an hour later and do some more movement. And I'm not saying you're on there doing canter intervals, it's movement. It's all valuable movement. And that mimics how they are in the wild, because they cover a lot of miles in the wild, but it's not like they start their watch at 7 a.m. and they get all their miles in and then it's over, right? It's throughout a day. And the same with people, like even hardcore athletes, the one who work desk jobs, they might go run vigorously for an hour in the morning, but then the rest of their day is sedentary, and they still suffer all the ills of people who are predominantly sedentary, similar with our horses. So this is a great way to, you referenced engaging their mind throughout a day, or, a couple of times during a chunk of time that you have at the barn. And I just wanted to highlight, it also has a huge physical payoff, huge. So was there any, I think I cut you off. Was there anything else you wanted to add on how you interject curiosity in your own horses, and how you think about that, how you structure that, how you help students structure that?
Well, anytime there's something novel that the horse wants to look at, fine. I mean, once in a while we'll walk in the arena, and I've got barrels that have been there for 10, 15 years. And once in a while we'll walk in the arena and Brandy goes, oh, I think I need to check that barrel out. Okay, I don't care. Let's take 2 minutes for you to go over and sniff the barrel. Maybe something interesting, some critter came by or whatever. And so that's just, my horses know that it's always okay to go check something new out. And of course, we know they all have varying degrees of concern about new things. And then we just go with that. So Bronze generally looks at everything new like, yeah, whatever. And my husband's mare needs to really inspect and check out anything that's new. Brandy's the one who has to check out anything new that's out in the woods around the farm. So the more that we can let them show us what matters to them. And another thing that they actually play is a very important positive emotion. And you might think of play as like running around, but in fact, I think they get jokes sometimes. So I like to try and get that. Sometimes I see it, especially in Brandy, this little spark of like, oh, I get it. There was a joke. So it's something like I start to have them do an exercise, and their attitude is kind of like, nah, I did that yesterday. I don't really feel like it. So I let the horse stand there and I do the exercise while the horse watches. And it's like I see this little thought process going in their head, like, oh, this is different. This is interesting. And then they're more interested in doing it with me after that. Or let them play with something. I ask Bronze to weave cones, and it's pretty much guaranteed he's going to stop and pick one up. So I laugh. The more we laugh, horses know that laughter is a good thing. So when you laugh, that's really positive and engaging. They recognize facial expressions. So when you smile, they see that and they recognize that as, oh, this is a good thing. So and if they take the initiative to do something like pausing to pick up a cone or go to a different part of the arena that shows me this is where I want to work, I try to go with that. Another thing you can do, even in the midst of and whatever goals you're working on, is sometimes just stop and on a loose rein, let your horse tell you where he wants to go. And this one I found really funny with Bronze, because he generally, when I'm riding, says, I don't want to do the trot pulls. I really would rather dodge out around them. But when I started letting him decide, okay, you've done what I've asked you to do for 10 minutes. Now you got a couple of minutes to show me what you feel like doing. I'm just going to sit here and be a passenger. And he picks up a trot and trots through the trot poles. Why? I don't know, but it was his choice. And he did it better than usual. So sometimes just let them tell us what they want to do. Give them a few minutes of, this is your free time. Because if we're not working on any issues, presumably we've got a horse who's reasonably well behaved and isn't going to do anything stupid or dangerous. So we have that luxury of letting them have that free time and show us what they'd like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And to connect the dots for anybody who might be a skeptic at this point and say, well, I'm working on my discipline. I'm fine tuning my Western dressage pattern or my whatever performance it is that you're fine tuning. Why does it matter that I let my horse stop and pick up the cone or engage with an obstacle, for example? And just to underscore that neurochemical response in the horse's brain that comes from these types of interactions and in cultivating these interactions, the horses, that neurochemical reaction, the limbic system directly affects their ability to utilize their muscles well. So it is so imperative, and we're just learning more and more about this, and it's so exciting. So it does matter when, even if you think your goal with your horse might be refining your dressage sequence of movements, this helps in the long run, because especially a sport like dressage, it takes years and years and years of kind of doing the same thing to get it right. There's a lot of repetition in this sort of maintenance training that we're talking about. So these little moments to interject this novelty, this curiosity, this checking in with your relationship with your horse. Do they trust you? Do they follow you? Are they bright-eyed around you? These sorts of questions. It's so important because it gives you as a read on how well they actually can use their muscles, how powerfully they can use them, whether or not they can turn on supporting groups of muscles and switch off the ones that need to be switched off. So it's all connected is what it comes back to, right? Again and again.
Yes, yeah, that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And speaking of dressage and the movements, another variation is if you start your warm up on the ground with synchronizing with your horse, then you've got your horse walking in step with you, larger steps, smaller steps, faster, slower, and then the synchronizing also then expands to your posture. So if your posture is good, you're encouraging your horse to have better posture. If your halts are balanced and your weight's back a little bit, your horse is more likely to copy you. So you are actually, to a horse, this is play, because it's something that young horses, especially young fillies, do. Synchronizing with each other is a form of play, but we can use that to play with them and ask them to or invite them to copy what we do. But you can also use that as training when you're using your own body, and then we can invite them to synchronize with us as we do turns on the haunches or turns on the forehand or side pass, or back up. So all of these things, and if the horse thinks he's playing while he's learning, well, so much the better. We could also take a break from something the horse likes. My sister had a very talented dressage horse who just didn't care about dressage, but she loved to jump. So she would put up a few jumps, didn't take many, but she would put up a few jumps and then intersperse the dressage with some jumping. And that kept Sammy's interest in what they were doing, because for her, the jumping was a big reward. And synchronizing can be a great way to play with the horses, and also to invite your horse to take initiative. And if you have a horse who's been shut down, then taking initiative, once you see them taking initiative, that says that you're making huge progress in getting back in touch with their feelings and engaging with you and trusting you. So you can take it beyond just the leading and play with it. Like, well, what if I bend down? Do you bend down with me? What if I pick up a cone? Would you like to pick up a cone? I can put my foot up on the mounting block. Would you like to put your foot up there? And if your horse doesn't engage with you, you can copy the horse. And that almost always gets their interest, like, oh, this person is doing something kind of interesting. How's this working? And then the horse starts experimenting, doing different things and watching how you copy them. And another one that I have found really engaging for horses who get bored easily is music.
Yeah.
But not just playing music while you ride. A lot of people say, oh, yeah, I use music when I ride. But what they mean is they're playing their favorite playlist, which may or may not mean a thing to the horse. I'm thinking of music that matches the horse's beat and gets the horse's interest. And when we use music that matches the horse's optimal pace at any particular gait, then the horses naturally match a steady beat. They want to. Bronze and I both have a really hard time with the idea of maintaining a steady rhythm, especially at the trot. So I thought, well, maybe I could teach him to trot to music. Well, day one, it was very obvious that he not only wanted to trot to the music, he couldn't not stay with the music. I played something that was too slow, and he was tiptoeing along in slow motion to stay with the music. So you need to look for music that matches the horse's rhythm, that has a good steady beat, and that the horse likes. They definitely have preferences in music.
It's so true. Yeah. When I play music for my students, to your point, I've never had it not have a big response with all the horses. I used to have this CD back in the day of CDs, and it would have different speeds of trot music. Some of it was big band and some of it was swing music. And some of it was for slower trotting, some of it was for faster, and all the horses just kind of perked up. You could see just this life force come in, and they were just matching. It always worked. Sometimes when I needed to sort of just spice things up in my group lessons, I've never had anybody not respond to music. It's so cool.
That's cool. Yeah, because you probably used it with a lot more horses than I have. And it's neat to hear then that sounds like a pretty universal thing that captures their interest. And I found that there's clearly individual preferences. Bronze's favorite music is the theme from Hawaii Five-0. It is technically the wrong speed for his trot, but he loves it so much he makes sure it works for him. And it's like he grows 3 inches when that music comes on.
So fun. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I like the example of your sister as well. I want to go back to that for a second, because one of the things, again, I think maybe this has more to do with checking in with ourselves and being honest with ourselves. But for riders that are lucky enough to have a horse for many, many years, and as that horse grows older, I think sometimes we get locked into our identities as whatever we think we are, a dressage rider, an endurance rider, whatever we think we are. Sometimes we might have a curiosity about something else, but we might not explore it. And or sometimes our horse physically or maybe mentally, they burn out on horse shows. I've seen that happen a lot. Just the stress gets to a point where they're like, I'm done with showing. And it's time to pivot to something else. And you can play around and see what that thing is. And I know it sounds simple, but I just like to remind people to make that available. And it's okay. Just because you identified for a period of time as a certain discipline rider, you can do something else and still be super skilled at whatever your primary discipline was, and your horse and you can thrive in a new sport or something that's a little different. Sometimes it's just a certain period of time, but don't be afraid to let that happen. I've seen so many people find new journeys for themselves and their horse, and just total contentment. I know a colleague of mine in Vermont, she pivoted to Western dressage from just regular English dressage. And the difference in her horse was immediate. I mean, it was immediate, and she never turned back. I mean, the horse was so much more at ease and relaxed, and probably mirroring a rider, because the rider was probably a bit more relaxed stepping into that other discipline, but perfect match, so don't be afraid to explore a little bit, I guess, is my message.
Yeah, another thing that often captures horses and can really help people's communication or communication with our horses is agility.
Mm-hmm.
Horse agility is it's really a pretty casual sport in that you can compete or you can just play with it. But when you do agility, the goal is precision, not speed. So as you're working with the horse in different on different patterns and different obstacles, it's always about cueing the horse to do what you would like him to do, and him needing to read your cues very clearly, but you're needing to be very clear on your cues. So if the horse doesn't do as you've asked, it's not correct the horse. It's like figure out what cues you need. And so that really intensely helps our communication with our horses, no matter what other sport you might want to do. So it's building both relationship and communication that you're going to take into whatever else you do with them.
That's neat. I'm wondering, because we don't see, at least immediately around me, I don't see a lot of horse agility. So I'm wondering, in your experience, what's the biggest gap or challenge for somebody that's come out of, let's say, a really strict kind of training boarding facility, and they want to explore something like agility? What's the biggest challenge that you've seen maybe in your experience?
Some of it may be that actually, for the most part, I see horses and people take to it pretty quickly and pretty comfortable. Because if you read the Horse Agility Handbook or connect with the Horse Agility Club, it starts very simple and very basic. But I think one of the biggest things that's difficult for people is to recognize that our communication is through our bodies, not the pressure of a lead line. So your first goal in horse agility is to go through a set of obstacles without your lead ever getting tight, ever. You lose points in a competition every time that lead goes tight. So it's all about your body language. And each new course expects different things with an obstacle. You can use one pole and you can do umpteen different things with this pole. So your horse needs to be watching your body language, and your body language needs to be very clear. And that was very difficult for me. I think that was the hardest part for me to shift to horse agility with Brandy, because she was watching my body language all the time. And I had the worst trouble trying to teach her to back up without pressure, because I wanted her to back up with the cue of kind of like my finger tapping the air. And sometimes she would, and sometimes she wouldn't. And I finally figured out it had to do with whether I leaned back. Forward, I could do anything I wanted with my hands. She just stood there looking at me like, yeah. As soon as I leaned back, she stepped back. So it really cued me into my body language. And of course, when we're more cued to our body language, our horse handling on the ground becomes more comfortable, and our riding's going to improve.
Yeah,
so that's going to carry over.
Yeah, it sounds like something we all should practice, actually, is get into some horse agility. The reason I asked you that question was, as I talked about in the podcast with Amy on this same topic of maintenance training, was what I don't want is for people to say, wow, Jack and Lynn said I should go introduce some novelty and pivot to something that might not be appropriate for your horse. I really believe that horses are individual. They have very individual personalities and capacities, and some are just suited for certain things more than others. And so in other words, not everything's going to be great for your horse. We're encouraging you to stimulate their curiosity and add novelty when you've had a horse over the long haul. That doesn't mean they're going to thrive with everything you throw at it. They may not love high speed endurance racing, for example, if they've always been sort of in a controlled arena environment. That's just one example. So that's why I asked you that question, Liz, just to keep things in perspective.
That's so important. You need to find something that you and your horse are enjoying together. To me, that's the whole point. And Bronze showed me right off the bat, he does not like horse agility. It is boring. But as soon as we started doing equagility, where we did agility courses with me on his back, I could hardly slow him down. He was all excited about it.
Okay.
And when we did equagility, the way that works is you do 5 obstacles once with the handler on the ground, then you mount up and you do the same 5 with the handler on the back, with riding him. And Bronze always plodded through the first 5 as if, Lynn's making me do this again. And I'd get on his back and instantly his whole body would perk up. And I was like, okay, let's go. So, you just play with what works for you, because chances are, if you and your horse are excited about the same thing, then you're going to do well with it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be great for your relationship, your communication, and everything else you do together.
And arguably,
your point, they don't all like the same thing.
And obviously it'll lead to you becoming a better horse person as well, because it'll expand your comfort zones a little bit. Not so much you blow your head open, right? But expanding our own comfort zones is something that's good for all of us on a regular basis. And I think that's what we're tapping into. So Zoom is telling me that we're winding down here. We have about 5 minutes left. So I don't want to run out of time before any viewers that are watching this after the fact on YouTube or wherever else after we post this. Lynn's going to post an article if you want to delve more into it on her website, and I'll let her give you that URL in a second. And we are doing these chats pretty much monthly. So if you have a topic you want us to cover, send it our way. We enjoy it. I enjoy it. And share it with your friends if it's useful. So Lynn, maybe share with us where we can do a little bit more reading on our own after this video.
You mean on my website?
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, my website's not working very well, but I will post on my Facebook page the link to the workaround that will get you into my website, and then until it's corrected. But I'm working on that article. That should be done tonight.
Great.
So people can go and see.
Gotta love technology, right?
It's great when it works. Yeah.
Righto. And then just a reminder for anybody that doesn't already have, Lynn's book is called What Horses Really Want, out by the same publisher that I have that published my book, 55 Corrective Exercises. I just find such a great dovetailing of our work. And it was great to talk to you again. And we'll hopefully see you next month.
Thanks, Jack. Good to see you.
You too. Take care, everybody.